2, 1, go. So let me introduce the esteemed panel to you. We're joined today by Mr. Oleksii Antypovych, the head of Rating Group, who implemented the survey. We also have the honor and pleasure of welcoming Deputy Minister of Interior Affairs, Kateryna Pavlichenko. Furthermore, we're joined by Mr. Gediminas, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Navickas, the Deputy Head of the European Union Delegation to Ukraine, and last but not least, of course, the EUAM Ukraine's Head of Mission, Mr. Rolf Holmboe. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Antypovych, who's going to present the key findings of the 2025 Public Opinion Survey. Please, Mr. Antypovych, the floor is yours.
Дякую. Чути мене?
I hope you can hear me. If that's okay, I would like to see the presentation on the screen. So, in general, this is actually the second survey during the war. The one that we did for the EUAM in Ukraine, and it's great. It demonstrates a certain dynamics. The sociology is interesting, but the best way to see it is to see the dynamics. We see the moods of the society, we see the direction we are moving in. So the survey was among 2,000 respondents, and the last surveys were filled out on August 5th. So actually we finished the whole survey in August. The method was a phone interview. It covered the whole area of Ukraine, even the dangerous areas. Dangerous, I mean physically dangerous. So in general, the results, I believe, are super positive, actually. So I'm gonna go to the trust subjects, trust to public organizations. I'm sorry, majority of Ukrainians actually trust to the European Union and the International Monetary Fund. Over 60% of trust to these two organizations. NATO, trust to NATO, it's actually quite high, but we have more people now that do not trust to this organization. As an example, if the trust to European Union is 63% and the number of people that do not trust the European Union is only 25, trust to NATO is 54%, and people that do not trust NATO, we have around 40% of those. So I guess the difference is quite sensible. But then on the other side, it's quite positive. How come the trust to NATO is higher than to EU? We do get it. The war is going on, and the majority of Ukrainians would love to, and they expect to have a higher level of protection from NATO, coming from NATO. The least trust, we have the UN organizations and Oleksii. Why? Well, first of all, a lot of people actually trust to these two organizations, but the majority of Ukrainians do not trust them. Why? Well, we do understand it, of course. The expectations that were put on them, as for any international organization, actually. First of all, it would be about ensuring bigger effect on Russia and ensuring security in Ukraine. So the guarantees of protection are the relevant ones, and they prevail. The less impact like that we see, the less trust we have to organizations like that. This is the approach Ukrainians have. So trust to the internal institutions. Let's take a look at that. It's the National Guard who's got the most trust of the Ukrainians, as well as the security service of Ukraine. Yes, of course, this is the preferences that these organizations have. Great indicators are coming from the Border Guard and the Center of Counteracting of Disinformation, State Bureau of Investigation, National Anti-Corruption Bureau, and the rest of the agencies, truly. Ministry of Justice, National Police, Ministry of Interior, all these organizations have a high level of trust in Ukraine. We only have 3 organizations that people do not really trust. We are talking about the State Customs Service. 60% of the Ukrainians rather not trust or do not trust at all. Office of the Prosecutor General, we have 66% of no trust to this institution, and judiciary or courts. In general, we can see 73% of Ukrainians that do not trust to the courts. Once again, the most interesting thing is to take a look at the dynamics of the indicators. You can see that the trends are quite nice, both for the National Guard, Security Service, Customs Service, Border Guard. They show a very positive dynamics of trust starting from year 2021, it goes for 23, 22. We could see an increase there as well. But I guess it's the National Anti-Corruption Bureau whose indicators went up to 48% actually, and we know why. The survey was over at the beginning of August, and then we had a law on National Anti-Corruption Bureau, the draft law. It was changed, and this topic was big in society, and this is how many Ukrainians actually found out that we have an organization like that. As for the prosecutor's office, the indicators are quite moderate, but they're still moderate. At the same time, we don't have any lows there. An attitude to reforms, and this is the assessment of the activities of the government. Well, Ukrainians are quite reserved. Only 3% assessed the efforts of the government as good. 21 said it's okay, sufficient, and the rest said that the Ukrainian government is not taking enough of effort when they do the reforms. What reforms they were happy with? Well, most of them are liking the digital transformation and the gender equality that people are happy with. This is less than 50% of satisfaction. But as for the security service reforms, it's less than 60. But once again, people are quite happy. As for the NPU reforms, majority is not happy with it, but over the 3/3 are happy. And the highest level of not being happy is with the judicial sector and prosecutor's office reforms. Combating corruption, here we have over 60 or 80% of Ukrainians that are not happy with this sector. When we look at the dynamics, we can tell that the indicators went up in terms of gender equality. Everything is quite stable. You can say Ukrainians didn't see any breakthrough in this direction. As for the support of the EU and perception of it, first of all, the Ukrainians expect of support in the area of counteracting corruption. We have 62% here. Over 40% of Ukrainians are talking about the support or a need to have a support in the investigation of the war crimes and the liberated areas from the EU. These indicators are quite high. And how efficient is support of the EU to Ukraine in different areas? We can actually say and be confident here that pretty much all the aid that comes from the European Union is perceived quite well by Ukrainians. You cannot say that it's really bad. Even counteracting corruption, I think the thirds of Ukrainians, 34%, believe it's efficient. The support of EU is efficient in this area. That's a lot, because this percentage believes that we got to do something with the corruption in Ukraine. As for the 42% who's not happy with the support in this area, it's still there, nevertheless. As for the rest of the reforms, whether it's strategic communications or consulting on the accession to the EU or investigation of the war crimes, pretty much all the indicators are visible to Ukrainians, and the support from the EU is quite visible. Let's take a look at the dynamics. Things are going up. That's great. I think it is just the advisory on the EU accession that didn't change over the years, but then at the same time it never stopped, right? And we have a lot of those. As for the rest, support of the rule of law or counteracting corruption, you can see if we look at the dynamics, the Ukrainians actually perceive it a lot better. They are aware of these and they rather call it effective. So the dynamics is super positive. EU accession. Well, I guess the first question was, do you think Ukraine will be able to do all the reforms needed for the EU accession? 20% says for sure we can. Definitely yes. All the reforms will be done. Pretty much half of respondents say rather yes, probably able to. And I guess 70% believes that we will be able to do whatever it takes to be part of the EU. But when will Ukraine be a member of the EU? Well, the dynamics is quite long. We've been trying to measure it from the 2021, and over the first months of the war, our faith into being in the EU in 1 year or two was quite high. It was over 60% of Ukrainians who believe that. As of today, we also have faith that we will be part of the EU, but we are more reserved as for the deadlines. Only 8% of Ukrainians believe that in a year or two we'll be part of the EU. I'm going to remind it to you, in March 22, after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we had over 60% of believers, which means now we're speaking of 5-10 years, so I guess this is half of the answers. We have 15% who says we will never join the EU, but before the full-scale invasion we had like a quarter of those, even more than that. So the dynamics is positive, and then at the same time it's quite reserved. And the reason is Ukrainians do not see any realistic, not even the realistic ones, but I guess step-by-step efforts to become part of the EU is the problem of the EU and Ukraine. And people are just expressing their opinions, advantages that Ukraine may get once it's part of the EU. I guess answers are the same as they were last year. It's the financial support, cooperation in security and defense, counteracting corruption, and safety guarantees, security guarantees. So once again, we're talking about finances, economics, support, development of Ukraine. The second thing would be security and protection, and I guess it should be at the first place. But in different surveys that we do, people say that the EU accession is perceived as the basic key step towards protecting ourselves from Russia. So it's a so-called international guarantee that Ukraine needs for its safety. And once again, counteracting corruption. That's point 3 that Ukrainians expect to get once they're part of the EU. Among the other advantages would be, the dynamics is the same. It's only the economic advantages that went up, and the expectation on the counteracting corruption kind of went down, because Ukrainians believe that things are not really changing there. That is why their expectations are reserved. But in general, Ukrainians are quite happy with the advantages from the EU accession. But there was an interesting question, and I appreciate EUAM for that. They asked the same question last year and this year. Do you believe European Union is interested in Ukraine, joining? We can see that 50% of the EU says yes, EU is interested in us being the member, rather interested, and same amount of people, half of the respondents, say EU rather is not interested in us being part of the Union. And you could have been wondering, how do we interpret that? But 2 years in a row, we have the same indicator, and we believe that Ukraine is interested in being part of the EU. Ukraine realizes all the advantages and the support from the EU, but then at the same time, Ukraine has doubts whether EU is interested in us being part of the European Union. And actually, it's a question that goes to the international communications with the Ukrainian society. Challenges and threats. Once again, it's a separate chapter in our survey. We were asking about the hybrid threats, the most dangerous ones for Ukraine. First of all, Ukrainians called online recruiting by the Russian agencies. That's a hybrid threat. Another one was fake news and cyber attacks. But then once again, whether it's 23 or 42%, this level of threat is super high, and this is the way Ukrainians see those. Does the hybrid warfare go worse? Over 50% of respondents said yes, it gets worse, it gets stronger. How do they assess it? Is it high? Is it moderate? 70% says it's high. Sorry, 95% that say that the hybrid threat is quite high. As for the preparation to counteract these threats, well, people are more critical here. Over 14% say that Ukraine is quite ready to counteract these attacks. And, this is a very careful assessment. About the veterans, we couldn't have mentioned this category because, first of all, we're really thankful to the veterans for protecting us, defending us and our state. And then we have a lot of veterans reintegrated in the society, and pretty much every second Ukrainian has somebody fighting at the moment, which means it will affect our future and our nowadays as well. And whatever we do with the veterans, well, it's going to be the request number one later on, because all of us have relatives and friends fighting for us. So, problems we may get in the future: PTSD, stress, disabilities, problems with alcohol and drug addictions, lack of respect, violations of law and criminal activities, domestic violence. We are talking about certain disorders of psychological kind and medical kind, actually. We have many people with disabilities. Unfortunately, their health suffers. And of course, we will need to do whatever it takes to make sure people are employed. And of course, there's going to be certain deviations like drug and alcohol addictions, and we will have to do something with it as well. And first of all, they will need rehabilitation, employment, and medical aid. This is the opinion of the Ukrainians. I gotta point it out, because we will have another survey a bit later, and we're doing it now. Actually, we're going to have a survey for the veterans. But I believe they will have pretty much the same expectations. Although they do not admit their psychological problems the same way, they mostly talk about the economical ones or problems with the relations with people around. Sources of information. I believe it's the second year in a row that in our survey, and actually from the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we can see that there is an increase of Telegram channels as being the main source of information. As of today, half of the Ukrainians believe this is the main source to receive information. The second place goes to not TV, no, not the way it was in years 22 and 23. In 2025, it's YouTube channels, actually. Of course, a discussion with your friends, relatives, and the fourth spot goes to the television marathon. So, this is the fourth year of the war, and the TV has pretty much lost its dominant part, because back then they were as important as the Telegram channels. The sources with fake news. I believe Ukrainians are not very honest here, because they mostly use telegrams, and the fakes, they say, normally come from the Instagram, Facebook, and social media resources. Well, you see, Telegram is actually not lower than those ones with the spreading fake news. But for some reason, Ukrainians believe this is the worst one. Although the amount of information pretty much doubles there. TV broadcasting, well, people do not believe that those spread a lot of fake news, fake information. How worried people are with this, with the fake news, fake information. Ukrainians are worried about that. 46% say they are concerned with that. But I'm going to go ahead and I gotta tell you that we had a survey on being affected by the fake information. So Ukrainians, they said that they are concerned with that, but then at the same time, they believe that they know how to tell the truth. And when you ask them, how do you check your information? How do you know it's fake and this is real? Do you check different resources? Do you go to official sites? Ukrainians say no. I know how to tell where the truth is, what the fake is, because I have a gut feeling. I have my intuition, and, we get it. It's not knowledge. It's being affected by fake information, disinformation, and the majority of Ukrainians, they actually get affected by it. Which organization do you believe the most in refuting disinformation and fake news? The Office of the President, international organization, but I guess the independent journalists are the ones who have the most authority there to refute any myth and fake information. But then at the same time, the problem is we do not read their blogs, independent blogs. We simply go to Telegram channels and we do not know sometimes who owns those channels. And once again, which networks, media people are subscribed to. The most of respondents say they follow Telegram channels. Another third is YouTube, and then it's Facebook. The lowest indicator is for Facebook, and back then, in pre-war times when we didn't have a lot of Telegram channels, Facebook was quite big, and as of today, it's a certain bubble where people of the older age hang out. Instagram, it's mostly for women. TikTok is youth. So I guess older women prefer Facebook, which means Facebook is kind of losing its attractiveness. Okay, so I'm done. I'm hoping I didn't take a lot of your time. If you have any questions, please go ahead, and the floor goes to my colleagues.
Thank you very much for walking us through some of the main findings. We didn't analyze this particular one, but I do dare believe that the support in the area of strategic communications, which ranked very high, maybe has made some contribution to the intuitive ability of Ukrainians to detect disinformation when collecting that online. But without regards to that, the findings regarding the Ministry of Internal Affairs as well as its agencies, I'm also happy to welcome again many of the representatives from the State Border Guard Service and the National Police today with us, which rank very high, consistently high in the survey. But Deputy Minister Pavlichenko, if you could please share some insights regarding the results on public trust in the Ministry of Internal Affairs and its agencies.
Дуже дякую вам. Доброго дня всім. Доброго дня, шановні міжнародні партнери.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, international partners. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for the survey, which result we were just exposed to. And before I would to reflect what we have heard just now, I want to highlight, first of all, that we are really very grateful to the European Union Advisory Mission in Ukraine that as of today, our internal affairs units are able to adopt the system to the nowadays challenges concerned and standards we have in the European Union, it's obvious that one of the main area of our cooperation is a consistent reform of the civil security sector through providing strategic advice and practical support within the various matters as long as with the EU standards. There are certain moments I would like to comment right now. I'm talking first of all about the high assessment of National Guard and National Border Guard Service of Ukraine, which are coordinated by Ministry of Internal Affairs. We think them as the leaders in this survey, and it's obvious that we could give certain reasons for this, but again, I think the major reason is that those our special agencies are at the front line, are the servicemen of the National Guard, National Police, State Border Guards. They daily take part in the combat activities protecting our sovereignty and national integrity, and their courage, their commitment to this war form a very high level of public trust towards these agencies. At the same time, I would like to highlight that the trust is not only their courage, it's also daily, systemic and routine work we are conducting together with the support of our international partners, in particular with the EUAM, to implement high European standards in the area of safety and security. We should to highlight that during the war, the task and functions of a law enforcement agencies has increasingly and changed significantly, and currently law enforcement's fulfilling completely different functions that we did before the full-scale invasion. At the same time, the level of trust to the policemen is about 50%, and it's not only because of maintaining public order, but also because of the huge pile of work related to full scale, including the war crime investigation, evacuation, work at the liberated territories, when our police officers evacuating civilians from the front line adjacent territories, work with the families of missing persons, work in the special circumstances. These are very important indicators that should be taken into account. And we should understand the large scale and number of these crimes which are global. At the same time, I should highlight that thanks to the EUAM support, European mission, European Union, we have passed a numerous training for the national police, both in Ukraine and abroad in the European Union, with engagement of the European Union experts, which were dedicated to documenting of war crimes, investigation of war and international crime, to work at the liberated territories. Nowadays, our police officers have such high level experience and skill which would be of interest for the police officers and other law enforcement agencies in other countries, because it's unique for Ukraine. Also, I would like to highlight a very interesting rating that a respondent very interesting in support of EU in the war crime investigation, which also prove the high demand of society in restoring justice in Ukraine. A separate item I should highlight is the effectiveness of EU support in the sphere of strategic communication. 55% of respondents consider that this support is very important and positive. And here I would like to highlight that Ministry of Internal Affairs very actively work with EUAM on debuffing hybrid attacks and fake news at the central level and through its subordinated units. Very important and valuable in this survey for us is the section of threats and challenges. We should take it into account for updating and developing our future procedures, policies and practices. I think those threats are well understood. They include online hiring by Russian special services, and it's very relevant for today. Veteran support is also very important matter for Ukraine now. We do aware that the Ministry of Internal Affairs as a second, taking into account number of our veterans, and even now the Ministry of Internal Affairs is introducing the program for our veteran support, which is very needed for today, both for our veterans and for our society and for veterans' family members. So I think it became a very good vector of our future cooperation, of our future planning of activities to be implemented within the ministry. In general, I would like to express my gratitude for this survey, for its result. I think this survey will become sort of our roadmap for our future work, including joint work with the EUAM, with EU member states, and with other international partners. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. Navickas, the attitude of Ukrainians seems to have become a bit more realistic when it comes to accession to the European Union. If you could please share your thoughts on some of these findings.
Thanks a lot, and thank you for your invitation today to join the panel. This is very interesting. Thanks a lot for the survey, because for us, what we do here in Ukraine as European Union, as EU delegation, as our partners from the EU advisory mission, it's always the key to know what Ukrainians believe. So today's survey is also guiding our work and our support for the years to come. This is also a good moment to compare how we are also assessing how the perceptions are within the European Union, and we are also doing our own surveys. Just in September this year, we did special Eurobarometer on enlargement, which was meant to also assess the perceptions of EU citizens, but also of Ukrainians, what they believe and how they see themselves advancing towards European Union. So the findings of a special Eurobarometer that we did just weeks ago showed that more than 70%, 70, of Ukrainians would vote in favor of EU membership. According to this survey that we did, it also showed that trust in EU stands at 76%, and 82% of Ukrainians view EU-Ukraine relations positively. So this survey that you just presented today confirms once again Ukraine's and its people deep commitment to European future. We all understand that this is a conscious choice of the people who are fighting today and dying today for freedom, for dignity, and for a place in European family. And of course, we as European Union, we were with Ukraine, with Ukrainian citizens, all along this path. We as a EU delegation, but also a EU advisory mission, we've been advising, mentoring, and training Ukrainian partners, helping to build a sustainable, accountable, and efficient civilian sector and government of Ukraine. So we're happy to see the outcome of that assessment that also corresponds in the survey results that you just presented. And whenever we saw and we checked the results of your survey, for us, particular figures was that EU still enjoys the highest level of trust among Ukrainians. 63% is supporting that. And another figure, especially in these days, what is important is that, as you also highlighted, that Ukrainians see European Union as a key ally in supporting anti-corruption efforts. That was supported by 62% of respondents. That, of course, commits us to reform, to do it together, and Ukraine has our full support. Just to give you a few figures that we always highlight is that European Union and its member states are Ukraine's leading donor. We already provided more than 170 billion of euros supporting overall effort and more than 60 billion euros in military assistance to Ukraine. Of course, this recognition that we witnessed in our survey, in the survey that you just presented, comes with a responsibility for us all, including for European Union. And it also commits us to deliver and do it consistently. So whenever we speak about threats and challenges, and also commenting on the survey that you presented, we of course see that 1/3 of Ukrainians recognize dangers of the Russian hybrid threats and what we are posing on your society. We are all in the same boats. We are also assessing that threat to European Union and its member states. And of course that Ukraine, but also EU, comes at the very top of Kremlin's information manipulation and interference operations. And we all assess that it has two major objectives. First of all is to sow divisions in Ukrainian society, but secondly to weaken much needed international support to Ukraine. So here comes of course common challenge which requires our collective response, and for us it is very clear in EU delegation, but also in Brussels, that European resilience counts for nothing if Ukraine is not resilient. So here, of course, what we do on the ground as EU delegation, together with EU advisory mission, is to support Ukraine's strategic communication efforts, which remains a priority for European Union. In particularly, especially this year, we are working very closely with the government of Ukraine, with the civil society, with media partners, making a collective effort in having a better strategic communication. You mentioned quite significantly in your survey the perceptions towards accession of Ukraine, towards European Union, and of course it is very clear that Ukraine must build its strong foundations as a future EU member state. That means boosting rule of law, preserving and strengthening independent anti-corruption bodies. And the message from our side was very clear all along the way, that rule of law is the backbone of European integration, and fighting corruption is central to Ukraine's accession towards European Union. Enlargement is being debated a lot in Ukraine, but also in Brussels. There is a significant attention, and this is also due to Ukraine's heroic efforts and dedication. We treat enlargement not as a gift. Enlargement, it is a merit-based process, and we acknowledge Ukraine's progress, what Ukrainian government did over the years on the rule of law, anti-corruption, fundamental rights, and these issues will determine the speed of accession. And in essence, these reforms will bring more to Ukrainian society than meeting and benchmarks coming from Brussels. They are the ones that deliver the benefits for Ukrainian citizens, whether it is a strong institutions, fairer justice, healthy economy, or greater prosperity. So here, let me stress that our assessment is very clear in Brussels by the European Commission that Ukraine has done a remarkable commitment on its reform paths. And since the opening of accession negotiations, Ukraine has moved steadily forward on key reforms. We have delivered in Brussels the fastest screening process in European Union history. That would not be possible without commitment of Ukrainian government. So we are soon about to complete this screening process of Ukraine's readiness to join European Union. Of course, next steps of EU accession negotiations will be very important, and we are determined to continue to support Ukraine in making a steady process towards European Union accession. So thanks a lot for the invitation today, and thank you for sharing these results, because they are always very important for us, measuring the perceptions in Ukraine but also in European Union. On our side, we did this survey in September for the perceptions towards the enlargement. This is more focused survey, but we're doing on a regular basis, and the next one should come by the end of the year. So thank you a lot for supporting our common work in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, Mr. Navickas. Here, indeed, that the results of both of these surveys are mutually confirmative. Now, on the note of reform, Mr. Holmboe, public perception is the topic of today's discussion. Now, my question is, what role does it play when it comes to the reform of the civilian security sector, specifically, which is at the core of the mandate of the EUAM Ukraine?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much also for your kind word, Minister, and thank you for the survey that has been carried out, which is a very useful guidance tool for not only the work in the civilian security sector, but also for those of us that are supportive of both the reform efforts, but also the meeting the huge wartime challenges that civilian security agencies are actually carrying out. And I wanted to take this opportunity to recognize the efforts not only of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, but also of the key agencies that are now providing a large number of officers to assist in the military fight at the front, from the police, from the State Border Guard Service, from the National Guard and others, and at the same time meeting massive wartime challenges imposed by the full-scale aggression, international crimes, for it's just one area, but also stabilization in the war-affected areas is providing or presenting huge challenges for the civilian security agencies in their support to the civilians in these areas. But at the same time, the ministry and the agencies are now also carrying out quite a massive reform process, which, as Gediminas was underscoring, it goes a long way towards the rule of law, good governance, and the fight against corruption, all of which are indispensable parts of joining the European Union. So, to come to the question. I think what is important is that the survey confirms the high and in certain parts rising trust in the civilian security agencies. And in that regard, surveys like this are important because it gives us all a possibility to gauge the public trust in this case, in the civilian security agencies and in the work that they do. And it could also provide some guidance for us going forward in areas of concern. What it can do, it can help us sort of understand where the public is aware of the issues in the public sector. Also, we can understand better the issues of concern, of public concern, when we talk about the civilian security sector. We can measure the trust, as we just discussed, and we can also track public perceptions as to the ongoing reform efforts. All of this is important because as public institutions, and the EU and the EUAM is also public institutions, we are all responsible to our publics. Those that, from where we come from a European context, obviously, the civilian security agencies are responsible to the people of Ukraine, ultimately. So it's important to understand how they perceive the situation and what their concerns are, and also where perhaps we need more communications, better communications, more dialogue. So the strategic communications and also our partnership with the ministry in supporting strategic communication and dialogue with the population, I also think is hugely important. Of course, I mean, the areas of concern that come forward was mentioned by Gediminas, which is first and foremost corruption, of course. There's a persistent dissatisfaction with anti-corruption efforts, and it's a serious concern that sort of remains. And this, there's no doubt that this negatively influences public confidence in reform. So that's one area. I would also say that to build public confidence through communication and dialogue is especially important in this particular period that we are now under martial law, where certain rules are put on hold with regard to being able to fight as effectively as possible the war against Russia. And it also poses special responsibilities upon all public agencies in communicating and in entering into dialogue and continuously building trust with the agencies, from the agencies to the public that ultimately we serve. But now is the time to basically learn from the results of the survey, and obviously together with the Ministry of Internal Affairs, together with the agencies in the civilian security sector, to work on how we can continue to strengthen the reform efforts in support of the EU delegation and the EU Commission's work that supports Ukraine in the reform processes towards EU accession, but also how we can be best as possible supportive of you in meeting the massive wartime challenges that you are facing at the same time. So thank you again to Rating. Thank you again also to those in the mission that have been responsible for setting up this survey. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for your input, Rolf. Now, we've come to the point where the floor is open for a question from the audiences, and I'm delighted to see that I don't have to do the icebreaker. Thank you very much. We've got two in the first row.
Hello, everyone. My name is Petro Kananai. I'm a military diplomat in the past. I'm a colonel, retired colonel of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In terms of strategic communications, I would like to say that, first of all, I would really like to thank for this survey that you did, since it gives us a chance to take another angle at looking at the situation in Ukraine, seeing it from the other angle. And I propose in the future surveys to take a look at the situation from the top. What I mean here is, dear speakers talked about a war in Ukraine or full-scale invasion of who knows who knows where. So, dear friends, let's not save our words. And I need to point out, it's a war that is going on, liberating war that started in 2014. It was against the aggression of the Russian Federation. And once we name it like this, it's going to be clear to us that the war has not been going on for 4 years only, but it's been going on for years, and right now we are in the hot phase of the war that Russian Federation started. And we need to say it, that Russian Federation started it because the UN actually admitted that, the General Assembly did. So the second issue, I believe it's very useful, when they were asking when Ukrainians were asked what they think of the European Union, and the answer was everybody wants it to be the truth, but nobody knows when. And the question is what Ukraine has to do for that. And Ukrainians may give you a lot of advices if this question is part of the survey, but one of the key link, I believe, that will pull all the reforms along with it would be maybe EU can ask Ukrainian government where is a law on the opposition in the parliament. When I asked our members of parliament of Ukraine, starting from their first session, is there any draft law about the opposition within the parliament? And they said it's a very crucial issue, we're going to work on it. Young members of parliament that are there from all the parties said, we do have a draft of the law, but it's not a good time for it right now. So I believe with the help of EU, this issue can be relevant and timely, because once this question is asked, without the elections, we will have a chance to restructure the parliament and to attract other forces like media. I guess this is it from my part. And I believe if anyone has any other questions, I can give an answer to them later. Thank you for this chance. Valery Chai.
Commission delegation EUAM, our authorities is a place as just cannot say this meets civil society authorities and our partners, European partners. Just one comment, we're really interested in this Mr. Antypovych briefing. It's not the first. We are in Ukraine monitoring of this for years, for decades. And what's my perception from that, frankly, I'm not very happy. This Ukrainians more optimist now than it was some years ago. Nothing changed. Our ministers, our sources working hard, and we are very close to the chapters and negotiation process. At the same time, Ukrainian less optimistic. What's happened? War, as Kateryna now just mentioned, war is one of the reasons. But another one, probably not a strategic communication, is pretty good. It's probably about European Union position and more skeptical political position of many countries, as Mr. Merz, Chancellor of Deutschland or Germany, mentioned. Probably Ukraine will be not a member until 2029. That's another problem for communication outside. My question very simple. У мене питання, бачу, що представники
My question is, I can see that the representatives of the national police are here, and we are welcoming you here. And Ms. Kateryna said that the level of support, and I do agree with it entirely, support to those who fight, National Guard, National Police, and Border Guard services, even now, actually. And yes, in Russia, at the moment, in Kursk region, the European borders are protected by our border guards, and they had to push out from the land of Europe, Ukraine is part of Europe, to push them out and to protect the borders of the European Union. But we are not speaking about this subject today. We have another subject that we are discussing today, and it's about the briefing, this wonderful briefing that took place. I have a simple question, but it's very specific. I believe, Ms. Deputy Minister, it's going to be simple for you. The movement towards the EU succession, while we are getting closer to it, we're having more specific questions, like how important for Ukrainians to know that they will need to change their driver's licenses, that the deadlines EU has is different for those. You have to change your driver's licenses quite often. Technical maintenance of vehicles, there's a certain type that has to be done. Next is traffic security, traffic safety. The penalties are quite expensive in Europe. I've seen an experience of Poland and other countries, and the number of optimists would go down in the end of the process because of the details like this. So in Ukraine, sometimes for citizens, not during the war, of course, but sometimes they think it's easier to live in Ukraine than it is in EU. So do you think you can consider these issues when you do the next survey and when you communicate with the EU delegation? We are happy to support you, and we can be a platform of communication. Thank you so much.
It's the opportunity to actually react to these questions. Thank you, sir.
Дякую вам за це важливе питання.
Thank you so much for these important questions. My answer to you is, actually, we have already discussed it, and our speakers mentioned that. But at the moment, in general, each ministry does the assessment of the national legislation in their own area in order to see whether it is compliant with the norms of the EU. This assessment is going on. We are working on certain amendments, legislative amendments, and truly all those issues that you mentioned. Yes, we're gonna have to take changes in those processes and procedures that differ from the ones that EU has. Yes, of course, we're going to communicate on that. We're going to give explanations to our citizens. And I hope that you also will be able to be part of these communications and explanations. Maybe my colleagues would like to add something on that. Valerie, thank you. That was an interesting question. I do agree with you completely. Ukrainians would love to be part of Europe because the life is better in Europe. But unfortunately, not many Ukrainians in pre-war times were able to travel to European countries and see what things are like there. And you know, the grass is greener on the other side and the sun is brighter, but they also have many rules, laws, and that's why they do not have corruption there. So I believe it's going to be a huge spectrum of communication that will have to take place. Communication on various issues. You were talking about some very basic, practical things, but you know, me being a sociologist, I wasn't even thinking of those. But now I believe to study those tiny parts of reforms like this necessity to renew driver's permit or abiding the traffic rules, whatever. I believe those tiny little parts will help to improve the consciousness of Ukrainians and make it more European. Because us, as citizens of Ukraine, we do realize a value of our own country. Although this perception could have been different before the big war, but I believe our awareness will keep growing, and I believe we will have the ones who will oppose the EU succession, and we will be, let's put it this way, more sober in our perception of being part of the European Union.
Discussion, because on communication aspects will be a challenge not only for Ukrainian government here in Ukraine, but also for European Commission explaining the enlargement process in all EU member states. So enlargement process is a two-way street. There is a reform path, and of course it's not solely linked to the very nitty-gritty regulations, but also the sentiment and feeling within the society. So I think that today that we discussed the results of the survey and what we also conveyed from our side shows a very clear determination and gravitation of Ukrainian society. So this is from where we start, of course, and this is the key parameter when we are assessing. Whenever the actual negotiation process will start, that will be a huge challenge, as always it is, with every single wave of enlargement and accession towards European Union. This is also our joint collective responsibility of the countries which are acceding towards European Union, but also explaining it domestically. So whenever we are engaging in a survey and support for the enlargement, we also assessing what is the sentiment within the European Union, because this is also important. We will need to have an agreement of all EU member states, and happy to say that for the time being we have a majority that is supporting enlargement process. Yes, the results that we're doing in the EU member states differ from country to country, but overall picture is very very positive. So you rightly mentioned some very concrete elements, concrete laws that will touch upon every citizen in Ukraine, but I think we always also very important from the government side, but also from international partners, including from EU delegation here, to paint the larger picture, what membership brings. And you can see the result on all the statistics assessing the last two waves of enlargement negotiations. You can take 2004, when we have a huge number of countries joining European Union. You can see the economic development that those countries experienced, and this is unprecedented. So I think whenever we are discussing about the future of Ukraine, economic prosperity, accession towards European Union brings very clear answer what could be the benefits. But of course, the process itself is very beneficial for the country, for the society. Coming myself from Lithuania, I was part of this accession process towards European Union, and I see very clearly benefits. So I agree with you. It's a challenging task to communicate, to do it well, but we all need to start from the big picture, what it brings for every Ukrainian citizen as a country as a whole, but also what it brings to European Union, because European Union will also benefit immensely having Ukraine as part of European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go for a second round of questions, please, from the audience, if there are any. Go on. Yes, all the way in the back. Please, sir.
Hi, my name is Fukawa. I'm from Nikkei Asia. I just wondering of the impact of what happened in July when Rada tried to strip off the independence of Nabu and Sapo. How does it reflecting for the survey today, more detail? And then how its impact on the mood within the European Union about accession? Thank you. One more, sorry. And is there any survey result about the trust for the presidential office this time? Or you didn't survey this time? Thank you.
Вплив, скажімо так, подій.
Отож, okay, let's speak. The impact of cancellation of NABU powers and then the restoration, it was in the end of July, September, and exactly our survey touched part of this period, and it was represented in various surveys. First of all, there was a reduce in Ukrainians' perception of the situation, reduced support of the government of Ukraine, but then step-by-step restoration of the level of trust as it was before the NABU issue. And in our survey, only one finding demonstrated this is increased the trust over the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. It's increased 2 times. Comparing with 2024, and it's related, I think, that a lot of people just found out that NABU exists because of this scandal. Certainly, there were people who were satisfied with anti-corruption, but still, it demonstrated the Ukrainians before this issue, before this anti-corruption Maidan, were not aware about NABU existence. And it's also then increased trust not only to NABU but to the government as well, due to the restoration of NABU powers. And due to this issue, NABU became sort of a brand. I don't know whether I use this term properly for every average Ukrainian, so it was the impact. Thank you very much.
Antypovych, would you like to? No. Further questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this presentation. I'm Christina James, representing the section of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement at the U.S. Embassy. I'm curious about what goes into the perceptions of the State Border Guard Service, the National Guard, and the National Police, where how those perceptions have changed over time, and sort of what your average citizens report about their perception actions of those law enforcement agencies. Thank you very much.
Ну, я відповідаю за всі цифри.
I'm responsible for all figures in this survey, and I must highlight that the trust towards the agencies, you mentioned the agencies that are ensuring direct protection at the state borders we are talking about. Armed Forces of Ukraine, National Guard of Ukraine, these agencies still receive the highest level of trust, and it's related to as well. Though dynamics, and not even dynamics, but dynamics indicators of the surveys demonstrated also that Ukrainians were fairly reserved towards all governmental agencies, but only during the war, all governmental institution trust was significantly increased. And as for today, we could say that Security Service of Ukraine, National Guard of Ukraine, Armed Forces of Ukraine, trust increased. The Office of Prosecutors General is not so, but anyway, all the trust indicators are much better than they were before the full-scale invasion.
Please. Yes, once again, the gentleman in the front, please.
Оскільки
Since we became now a witness of the questions from foreign media, now we are coming to area of strategic communications. I will give you some background and then put a question. In 2021, Ukraine committed itself to create a system of strategic communication until 2025. Question: whether anybody of you or interested from the EUAM or European Union any draft model of strategic communication in Ukraine? Have you heard about it at least? Thank you very much.
Нетрадиційним способом, бо я думаю, що
Can you allow me to do untraditional thing?
Let's want to react to that question first.
окей, я не випадково це зробив, тому що тут немає.
I did not for purpose, but there is no speaker who could reply this question. So I think that we in our center could reply this question because our center established a system of strategic communication in Ukraine together with the cabinet of ministers, and we were the body who created this structure. We are talking about center of countering disinformation. That's why I took the floor, not because I just wanted to conquer the stage. I know the problem. The system which was created in 2014. Each ministry had a contact point responsible for the strategic communication, including the Ministry of Defense. Also, there were trained specialists thanks to the donor support. And the European Union helped in this line. The US Embassy helped as well, and the USAID program, which to our regret now couldn't support us anymore. And a very reduction or termination of a lot of projects were due to the early termination of donor support from our American partners. Now our Ukrainian Crisis Media Center continues the work to support the structures together with the European Union. We've got European grant support, which is come to termination very soon. The problem is that the strategic communication system is not created. We've got now the Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs, Ms. Kateryna, who is also responsible for strategic communication, and it proves that system of strategic communication exists. But the problem is that I have a feeling that the last time there are lack of platform where we could discuss. Now we've got a very unique event. We've got very open and frank questions from the civil society. We've got donors, we've got government representations, but recent time such events are not so widespread in Ukraine. That's why I think the problem of strategic communication now more at the level of the government. The government couldn't communicate with civil society only through parliament or only through very specific events where the president's available. It's not a correct communication. Everything is very simple. We should come back to the system of strategic communication, which was very effective in Ukraine back before the full scale. We always got know-how ideas, but now these new ideas couldn't be implemented only by the office of the President of Ukraine or by the government of Ukraine. Each ministry has a very specific work and activities, and I'm very glad that we could communicate today with the Ministry of Internal Affairs, with the National Police, because we couldn't use the same pattern for National Police and the Ministry of Agricultural Police, because we are very different. Economy and internal affairs are very different, especially for the countries in war. So I think we attract your attention that this topic was heard, and I hope this area will be developed. And thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, to allow me to conquer the stage.
Front row.
Доброго дня, мене звуть Сергій Йонушес, я голова.
Good day, I'm Sergei Yonushis. I'm head of the Committee of Law Enforcement Committee of Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. First of all, I would like to thank you to EUAM and Rating Group for this survey, and just briefly introduce you and support the position of Ms. Kateryna Pavlichenko, Deputy Minister, about the level of trust to law enforcement. Historically, law enforcement agencies in Ukraine didn't benefit from such high trust. And now, because they are defending our country with the armed forces, they've got the high trust. You see successful operation of SSU, of NGU, and also NPU has specific fighting unit, Loot, Rage, and not only our state bodyguards protecting our borders, they also fight with armed forces. I think the finding of this survey is a proof and response how now the state agencies, and I'm talking about law enforcement because it's our topic, work during the war. Thank you very much.
The audience. In the meantime, I have to say that I'm delighted to hear that the topic of strategic communications enjoys such great attention. I do know for a fact that in the ministry and in all of its agencies, there is high-class professionals at work when it comes to strategic communications, and it's my great pleasure to add that it's indeed the EUAM Ukraine Strategic Communications team that supports all of these colleagues in the ministry and across the agencies. But after singing our own praises, please, more questions from the audience. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. That doesn't seem to be the case. No hammer this time around. Let me thank, first of all, the esteemed panelists for joining us today. Thank you very much. Many thanks also to everybody in the audience for joining us and for actively participating in this event. Last but not least, of course, many thanks to the colleagues from the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, to the colleagues from the EUAM Ukraine who supported us with translation, and of course to the EUAM Ukraine's Press and Public Information Division who made all of this happen. Thank you very much for coming out, and I'm looking forward to see you again in a year's time for the results of the 26th survey, which we'll surely do. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. Дуже вам дякую.